obviously been a journalist for quite some time. And, but most of us, I think, came to really recognize your face, even if we were following your work. When, you did a high profile interview last year that related to a woman who was finally ready to speak her truth about some allegations concerning rape, right? So why was it important for you as a journalist to tell those kind of stories, right? And what is the role of the media in surfacing and then amplifying the voices of survivors, including boys, which we know we cannot remove from this particular conversation?
Anybody who understands the true role of journalism knows that historically, it goes beyond reporting the facts, beyond telling stories that appear to you. Your job is to actively find stories that properly reflect the breadth of society. Mm-hmm. And that's why women's voices have been excluded in this society, because we have a culture that silences the less powerful and minorities actively. It doesn't just, this is not unconscious bias, this is conscious. So the first problem is cultural. And often the media, when it is acting in default, reflects society's biases, yeah? But it's important for the media to understand that its job is not just defensive or reflective. Its voice is also offensive and proactive, which is this a just society? Is this an even society? Is this an equal society? And what do we need to do to make it that way? And then we begin to tell the stories that enable society become the best version of itself. So that's what the Bosola interview was about. It was shocking to me that up until that time, I couldn't find in our research any woman, any high-profile woman, or even not high-profile woman, who had accused a truly powerful man, not just a man who was powerful in her context, but a man who was powerful nationally. Nobody. And I thought that didn't make sense, because obviously the rape numbers have always been high, even when the police and the law courts were not taking rape seriously, which they still aren't relatively. So for me, that was important. I thought, okay, this was a fine opportunity to try and begin to tip the scales. Yeah. And also it was important sadly, it mattered for the person who did that interview to be a man, sadly, to be a man who people couldn't dismiss as frivolous or emotional or any of those things, which also shows you the scale of the misogyny that underlines the silence of women. If it was another woman, doing that interview, many men would have easily dismissed it. It was also tragic for me that after I did the first interview, there were other women who came out. And I began to look for women, because I thought, look, I'm a man. There are some things that I just can't understand, even though I'm a journalist and I've been doing this for over a decade. So I wanted women to do the other conversation. Now, women journalists were telling me that people wouldn't take it seriously if it was a woman talking to another woman. I just found it really dispiriting on so many levels. So the real problem is that we have a culture of silence, an active, not just a culture where women keep quiet, but a culture that keeps women quiet. Mm-hmm. And so when you are in that culture, storytellers have a responsibility to keep tipping the scales until it is balanced. Mm-hmm. In fact, to even some, and unfortunately there will be some collateral damage, but to even aggressively tip the scales to the extent that people begin to cry out about a double standard. And then we know that we are beginning to have an equality of experiences. Somebody asked Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the United States Supreme Court, when will there be equality in America for women? Will it be when we have a woman president? And she said, no, it will be when we have as many women presidents as we have male presidents. So that shows kind of the responsibility that we all have as a society to mm-hmm. balance that scale. It's too balanced to the left. It needs to be balanced to the right. And that's why I did that one.
How can we now, get more journalists, right, to start to sign on for the long haul? Like, because we know that when it comes to rape cases or murder cases, like some of the ones that we're dealing with now, Professor Yinka mentioned that it's going to probably take years for the prosecution. because we don't yet have established special rape courts, right, which will expedite the process. How can we get other journalists, right, to commit for the long haul when we know that there are many other, cases that, many other news, clickbait or whatever, things that are a lot more interesting and superficial, right? But we know that people will likely, that are vying for their attention when these stories are so important.
It's the way that it's the way that society has always evolved, which is we need a few journalists to start. That's how it happens. It took the New York Times reporters who first dared to investigate Harvey Weinstein for the Me Too movement to catch fire. It just, the way society is, society always changes based on pioneers, people who say, I will do this. And then other people now climb on the backs of that person to do even more. And so the more people we have, and just look at it, just think about it, just literally think about the exponential growth in percentages in the number of rape cases, rape stories that were told last year that led to any form of action, and the ones that have been told this year. Just because certain journalists have told certain stories beyond even Busola, others now understand that this truly matters, and how this. So rather than interviewing, there were times when you can go into a courtroom as a lawyer and say to the woman, why did you walk into his room? Why were you not wearing underwear? And now we've created a context where such questions in other societies will not be accepted. We've created a context where people saying, what were you wearing, at least on social media, is no longer part of acceptable public discourse. But it took a few people speaking first. So that's what we need. We just need to keep encouraging people to seek out those stories and to tell them. We need to keep encouraging women and men, but especially women, to come out and tell their stories. The more stories are told, the more stories get to be told. Like, it's almost the chicken and the egg. For more stories to be told, people just need to keep finding, keep searching, keep pushing. That's the only way society has ever evolved.
If the girl comes out and speaks, it's almost automatically assumed that either she's lying or there must be something that she did, right, that contributed to it. If she does not speak, then they say, oh, it must not have happened. What took you so long? So how do you deal with that aspect of society that has adopted this sort of mindset as part of the response, and by shifting part of the responsibility almost automatically to the victim or survivor?
I think I'm going to allow a space of compassion for people when it comes to this. Rape, the nature of rape itself is deeply complex. Often rape, there are no witnesses for the vast majority of rapes, yeah? Because of the nature of sexual activity in and of itself, rape can be difficult to prove. So I'm going to give an example. I didn't believe that there was actually systemic police, and I'm a young Black person, so to speak, but I didn't believe there was actually systemic police oppression of Black people in America until Trayvon Martin's video. Like, I didn't. Like, intellectually, I heard it, but it didn't change my sentiment or my behavior. Each time I heard it, I thought it's not possible for a policeman to just randomly see a young Black person and shoot. He must have done something. I literally had to see the video to get it emotionally, yeah? And so I want to believe, and I do think it is credible, that the reason why many people quickly go to victim shaming is because we can't honestly believe how depraved many men are. We can't, honestly. We literally don't believe it when we say, this is how men have been for years. So usually human depravity is difficult to comprehend. We want to believe that human beings are fundamentally good, and they are. And so when we see something really terrible, we want to minimize, we want to deflect, we want to deny. And so the way that happens is we need to keep shoving these stories and images in people's faces. That's the only way. Human beings pretend, we pretend to be logical beings, but we make snap judgments all the time. One of the most powerful books on this subject is Malcolm Gladwell's 2019 book, Talking to Strangers. We only act when our emotions are affected.
Right.
And that's why journalists matter. That's why immigration wasn't taken seriously in Europe until there was that picture of the boy dead on the shores of Germany.
Right.
So journalists need to keep shoving these stories.
And I think the more that we tell these stories, like I think the point that you're making is that the more that we tell the stories, the more the stories will be told, right?
Absolutely.